Ever notice how we're always adding more to our super busy lives? More projects, more meetings, more commitments. We clutter our homes and run frantic on weekends, always more. But what if the secret to living our best life is actually to do less, not more? And it turns out, science backs it up. Humans have an unconscious bias to solve our problems by adding rather than subtracting. We opt for more over less and struggle to even see subtraction as a viable option. So if you're feeling stuck, it might be time to shift your thinking. Join Matt and me as we dive into the science of subtraction and explore why doing less is actually the secret to getting ahead. We share our personal battles, introduce the 5 capitals, and introduce 3 powerful strategies: bundling, trading, and eliminating to clear the clutter and make space for a surprising second act. Remember, adding isn't always the answer. Let's explore the power of less and make space for what truly matters. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Spacemakers Season 3, and we are exploring what it looks like to get unstuck if you feel stuck in an area or a domain of your life and need to get unstuck. And I'm here with the man, the myth, and the legend, the one and only Matt Bain. Welcome.
Thanks, Dan. It's great to be here. That's some mighty high expectations.
I know, we can only go up or down from there. But seriously, it's good to have you back here. Today we're going to talk about the science of subtraction.
That's great. I don't think I've done that since grade 3.
I don't think I have, and I still use my fingers to actually add and subtract. Yeah. But we're going to talk about why when you're feeling stuck, it's super helpful not just to add more to your busy life, and why it's important to consider doing less, not more.
Love it, yeah. So removal.
So here's the thing. Most of us add when we're trying to solve a problem. We get busy at work, and so we try to add new meetings, new projects, new AI, new things to our schedule to try to fix getting stuck. You know, in our home life, we fill our homes with clutter and then we wonder what to do. We even fill our social schedules so much that we feel like we need a break from our weekends. So the human bias tends to be adding as a way of solving problems, to do more, to find something new to do to fix our problems. And yet we're going to talk about the beauty of actually simplifying our life, and of doing less and of eliminating or subtracting when we're stuck.
I'd say even beyond trying to solve problems, just accumulating seems to be my natural bent.
Yeah, look, I often think about entropy and how things naturally degrade if you look at the science of entropy, but I think the same is true when it comes to accumulation in our culture, that it feels to me that if you don't actively push against adding up and accumulating, you just end up with more stuff in your work, in your relationships, in your life. And so I just think it's really helpful to pause and think about how can we do less, not more, or at least to do less of the wrong things, to do more of the right things in order to move forward.
Awesome. So let's subtract. And I believe as part of this episode, we're going to be going through both the science of subtraction, and we're going to be looking at three specific strategies to help us reduce.
How to bundle, how to trade, and how to eliminate to help people get unstuck.
Excellent.
So Matt, this is episode 3 of season 3. Each episode, we like to talk about what we've done because, or partly we want to get unstuck, but partly we want to encourage our listeners to do something with this information to get them unstuck.
Yeah, that's it. So last episode, we promoted the 5 capitals exercise, which we've done. So there was a download link attached. Hopefully people at home downloaded that.
Do you want to give a quick summary of the 5 capitals?
Yeah, 5 capitals. So this is like a great way of looking at your life as a whole by kind of, categorizing it into 5 domains. They are spiritual, so the inner kind of reflective life. It could be spirituality, it could be philosophy, but it's all about the inner life. Then we've got the relational. So the relational capital is your interpersonal relations, so friends, family, etc., etc. We've got the intellectual capital. So that's like the life of the mind, maybe hopefully it'll involve what you do for work, etc., but also hobbies. Then we've got the physical capital. So the physical capital, this one involves both your health, so your physical health, but also, really importantly, your time. And then lastly, we've got obviously the financial capital. So this is just like, the crass nuts and bolts, money coming in, money coming out.
Yeah, so the beautiful thing about this is you're taking the idea of capitals, something, that you see in the financial realm, buying and selling, etc., and you're moving it to the broader domain of, your relationships, your intellect, your spirituality, etc., and using that to help you make decisions about what matters to you, where you're struggling, and where you want to grow your capital. So it's
Yeah.
a diagnostic about the domains of your life, where you're overcooking things and where you're undercooking things, and really to help people work out where they want to get unstuck.
I found it really useful. I had like probably some intuition. We talked about that, I think, like last episode where I figured I was going to be stuck. But this just gave it even more crystal clarity. So it was obvious. It was really obvious that my particular domain where I'm stuck is the physical in the sense of time. I don't have enough time. I've overcommitted in that capital.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And that actually connects with a lot of other capitals for you, doesn't it? Because the reason I mean, we've chatted, and the reason you struggle so much with overcommitment and time is because it impacts your relationships, it impacts your sense of mental health, it impacts your kind of career. The squeeze is apparent in other areas that you care more about than time, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Again, for the sake of the exercise, and particularly as a diagnostic tool, it's really handy to be able to kind of, I suppose, put borders between the different areas of your life, but in reality, they all intersect.
In fact, every year, I do that activity every year because I run a masterclass with a bunch of leaders, and that's one of the activities we do at the start of the year. So it's a good way of me reflecting each year about where my capitals are, what my current state is, and where I want to head. And the last few years, I've actually put my spiritual capital quite low, and I've not wanted to invest in it because I've wanted to build my business. I wanted to invest in friendships and family. But yeah, it reinforced that actually I have this desire to actually put more time and energy into my inner life again, which is the area I've felt stuck. It's a good reinforcement that I do need to put some time into this area of my life, because it does impact how I feel about other areas as well.
Yeah, great.
So we're talking about the science of subtraction, and one of my favourite stories about subtraction is the invention of the donut. Do you know how that happened?
No, I don't. I'm just glad/surprised that you have favourite stories about subtraction.
Well, it's more about my donut love.
Okay, sure.
But so apparently, tea cakes are like donuts, and they're always kind of popular, but they kind of left too much gooey pastry in the middle because you couldn't quite get the right surface area when you cook them.
Yep.
So someone came up with the idea of taking the centre out of the tea cake, and that created a better surface area for cooking. And you also get the middle of the tea cake, which can be used for kind of dough balls. So the humble donut was invented, which I think is cool. It's an example where less is truly more.
Do you have a favourite donut? It's almost like a rhetorical question. Of course you got a favourite donut. What's your favourite donut?
My favourite donut is definitely the vanilla slice donut from Banjo's Bakery Cafes, who is actually one of the major sponsors of our podcast. I used to go there regularly to get a vanilla slice, and then they released their brand new donut range, and the vanilla slice donut came out, which is kind of like the best of both worlds. I love donuts, I love custard, I love the topping of vanilla slices. Oh my gosh, it's just fantastic. I can't get enough of them. But we're here to talk about Banjo's new bakery range of donuts.
Yeah, so they've just released, right after 3 years, I believe, of R&D, the whole range of donuts. Yeah.
Yes, and I think Banjo's is one of the first or the only bakery with a full donut range. They have an incredibly interesting range of donuts. They're delicious, they're fresh and cooked regularly. And, as their tagline says, we speak donuts. Well, we eat donuts. So if you're interested in checking out Banjo's new donut range, well then, go to one of the local stores around Australia. And even better, if you want to own a Banjo's Bakery Cafe as a franchisee, not just eat donuts, but make donuts and sell donuts.
And then eat them.
Yeah. Eat what's left. Well, then check out the show notes. We have a link for how to become an owner of a brand new Banjo's Bakery Cafe across Australia. So just check out the link in the show notes. You get a 10% discount on your franchisee fees if you sign up, but it'd be fantastic for you to investigate what it looks like to own and run a Banjo's Bakery Cafe and make vanilla slice donuts.
Learn how to speak donut.
So Matt, let's talk about the science of why it's helpful to do less, not more, or to remove things and declutter things from your life if you feel stuck.
Sounds great. The science of subtraction.
The science of subtraction. So look, this came out of a book that I read by Lady Klotz, an American author. He's a professor on the intersection of engineering and behavioural science. I think he used to be an architect, which makes sense, the whole less is more philosophy. But he was basically studying this premise, this idea that humans neglect subtraction as like a default in the way we solve problems. And so it's fascinating that there's a bunch of research in this book. He, for example, gave people some complex puzzles to complete or maybe Lego tasks, and there were two equal and opposite ways of solving the problem. One was to add, let's say, 2 Lego blocks, and the other was to remove 2 Lego blocks. Or one was to add a line in this puzzle, and the other was to remove a line, okay? But then when participants were given these puzzles to solve, and this was repeated again and again in different contexts, what the scientists found was that people almost always added. And not only did they always add, so they added the Lego blocks rather than remove, but they didn't even see elimination as an option, okay? And so Klotz calls this subtraction neglect, this phenomenon, this internal bias in the human condition where we try to solve our issues by adding more and by building things onto our life rather than even seeing the option of simplifying our life or removing to get the same outcome. This is actually a really profound idea, because when I work with people, all around Australia and globally, I do a lot of work with managers and leaders, business owners, and we're all smashed for time. Like, we lack space, which is what Spacemakers is about. And, this is in our work context. We're adding meetings, we're adding AI, we're adding new apps, new projects. And whenever you do a strategic plan, how do we improve the future? We add new things. Do you know what I mean? Like, we don't sit down and say, what can we remove? We ask the question, how can we add? We do this in our personal lives, which is why our houses get full. We do this with our social schedules. I just think we have a culture of more, and that's exhausting. And actually, when you feel stuck and you feel like you're losing in an area of life, what we're encouraging you to think about is, could you actually make progress by taking something out of your life or by doing something less rather than just adding something more? And once you open your eyes to those possibilities, there are lots of possibilities.
Sure.
Do you see this?
Yeah, I do, but I think it's really hard, because if most people, let me reverse that. If I'm like most people, particularly people who have felt stuck in one domain for a while, so they're conscious of that, I think there's part of you that can intuit that the way out is via subtraction or reduction. So you know that the option is there, and you know it's probably the smart play. But again, if I'm like most people, I always feel that's too much of a generalization. I frequently feel like it's some kind of concession, or it's a compromise, or it's a failure to actually reduce. And I think that's because inevitably it feels like when I'm doing that, I don't focus so much on what is there to be gained. I'm way too aware of the fact that I'm closing down options. That's how it feels.
Yeah,
I'm shutting down options. So I can tell myself the mantra again and again, less is more, less is more, less is more. But I think my basic operating system is still very much geared towards, no, more is more.
Yeah.
More is more, more is more. And the trajectory of most of our kind of, I guess upper middle class first world lives is about accumulation and expansion, more and more, until you get to a point where things are started to be forcibly removed from you. Like force reduction. So you get, if you live long enough, you probably get your license taken away from you. Yeah. Traveling is going to be more and more difficult.
So loss is subtraction is a loss.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a loss of independence. It's a loss of freedom.
Exactly.
It's a confronting of your finality as opposed to a strategic way of moving forward.
Yeah, that's right. So before that's wrested from me forcibly, I'm just going to keep on accumulating and gathering and expanding.
And it's interesting because you mentioned culture, and I wrestle with, the research has suggested this is inbuilt in the human condition, a bit like loss aversion, the idea that we experience loss more than we celebrate gains.
Yeah,
so I think
you feel it more.
You feel it more.
Yeah.
So I think there is something about the human condition that makes us want to add more to solve problems rather than reduce. But I also think we are shaped by our context. We're in a consumer society where the entrepreneurs always get more money and they build more things, and like all the advertising around our lives suggests that the way to solve our issues is to buy something.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because part of this set of studies that I read compared humans, people in the Western world, so let's say Australia, America, New Zealand, Canada, with the Eastern world, so places like China, Japan, areas of Southeast Asia. And even the language that people use is slightly different, and I think that probably links to our worldview. So when people in the Western world were asked to describe an unformed piece of art, okay, people were asked, okay, think about and describe what you think about immediately when you think about art that hasn't yet been produced. And in the Western world, people almost always described a blank canvas. And then you add ink or you add art or you add paint to it in order to create the artwork. Whereas in China and Japan, when everyday people were asked the same question, I want you to think about an unformed piece of art, what do you imagine? They actually came up with something very different. The majority of people described a rock. And that stone had not yet been chiseled away to become a statue, okay, which is fascinating, and maybe it's the art that they look at more, but you think about that, the idea of forming a piece of art by chiseling away rock is quite different. It's about subtraction and eliminating until you discover the beauty within.
So maybe another way of saying that is that in order to realise potential, the potential of something, again, do you add to it, or do you, again, remove
take
from
away,
it? Take out,
And I definitely think we need to add as part of our strategy for moving forward. It's not like and or. But the problem is in the Western world, and because of our human wiring, we tend to bias more and we tend to neglect subtraction. And that can be an issue, particularly in a world where we're already feeling busy and overloaded. I do have a quote that I love. This is from Michelangelo.
Oh yeah, he was a party dude, wasn't he?
He was a party dude. He was actually a Western artist, so this kind of ruins my whole analogy. But he says this: the sculpture is already complete within the marble block before I start my work. It is already there. I just have to chisel away the superfluous material. There's another quote he apparently said, which is, I saw the angel in the marble and carved until I set him free. And I really love that idea that what if we looked at our lives a bit like that? What if we actually really took seriously what part of the story could I remove and still have the story? What part of my work could I simplify? What part of my relationships could I simplify? Because not just about doing less, the aim is you want to create space in your life to maybe have the time to think and reflect on what needs to change, in order to do more of the right things. And yet just adding and adding and adding just ends up feeling cluttered.
Like that makes sense to me, but I guess where I experience personally some of the difficulty is that, to use your language, the right thing. So that's going to be an evaluation. It's going to be like a judgment call, and determining what the right thing is going to be at the expense of a bunch of potential wrong things. And again, so discerning between those can be difficult. So like Michelangelo can have his angel, but that's going to be the expense of, like, it means he's not going to be like doing the Mother Mary, for example. So one's going to cost him like the other. So
life's a trade-off. If you subtract, if you remove your options, and if you commit to not doing that next thing, well, then you are limiting your options.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a worldview in that, right?
Yeah, that's right. Because you're not keeping them open any longer.
Because you're not keeping them open.
Yeah.
Now we might talk about this in a future series, because I think freedom and choice are super entwined in this. The idea that is true freedom having as many options as possible, or is true freedom limiting your options? Like the classic being, yes, when I married my wife and chose, for her to be my lover for the rest of my life, and vice versa, we limited every other option, but there was great freedom in that. Whereas there's actually less freedom in opening our options. You see that in lots of different areas, but we're probably diving somewhere we should have for this episode.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, I'm curious as to what that great freedom was, but we can talk about that.
The freedom to be alone and watch reruns by myself. All right, let's move on. Okay, Matt, let's get practical, and we are working through the SHIFT framework in Season 3, which is the acrostic that guides the direction of how we're shaping these 10 episodes. So do you want to run through the SHIFT framework for us?
Yeah, love to. Okay, so SHIFT, 5 elements. Number 1, select a domain to focus on. Or maybe like to use some of the language that we have recently, select a capital.
Yeah,
select a capital like to work on. Okay, yeah. So we want to keep this realistic. So don't be like looking at all 5, 4, 3, or even 2 at once, but just select one. So that's where we are now.
Great. Yeah, and even that is a process of elimination. If I feel like I'm struggling in my finances and my relationships and my career is not good and my health's not good, You can't work on it all at the same time.
That's it.
So pick one which seems to be the right lever, and trust that if you can improve that domain just by a little bit and get unstuck there, it'll have a ripple effect.
Ripple effect.
So that's the aim, to pick one domain.
Yes, just one. So that's S. Yeah. Next we got H. So this is for harness your strengths, and we're going to be diving into this next week. So again, it's easy just to kind of go straight to our weaknesses when it comes to trying to get unstuck, but we're going to really be pushing it. No, the best lever to pull in the first instance is your strengths.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or at least you'll be pushing that. I'll be pushing back a little bit, but we'll see how it goes. Okay.
Yeah, but it's interesting. We're talking about subtracting now.
Yeah.
But when you do add, you want to start by adding on what's working, not what's not working. We'll get there.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, we'll get there. And then we've got I. So I is imagine various paths forward. So again, we don't want to be kind of like locked into saying, well, there's only one route. We want to imagine. We want to have options in front of us. That's the I. And then the F is about forging a path via action. So we want to forge a way forward via action. So again, there's a place for reflection and introspection, etc., but we're going to be suggesting really going with action.
Yeah, and it's almost the opposite of what we're saying now, actually. We want you to do less, not more, but there comes a point we need to do more. And so we'll get to that part of the framework, but just not at the start.
Yeah, that's right, not at the start. And then T, to conclude, is travel alongside others. So like we've already kind of intimated, we think that change has the greatest chance of both, effectiveness and also longevity if you embark on that with the right people around you.
Right. Well. All right. So we're on the S. We're talking about the domain. But once you've picked a domain of your life, the best way to move forward, we think, is to just simplify your life, make a bit of space, because that space will then give you the capacity to do the other things we're going to talk about next.
Yeah, that's right.
So we're going to talk about 3 practical strategies to eliminate, essentially, or to subtract.
Yeah, that's right. And none of these are about adding, because safe to assume that our audience out there, like us, they've got no more space or time to add more stuff on, right? So we're always assuming that people are already overloaded and busy.
Yeah, so and that's a good assumption. And therefore, if people want to change something, you can't just say, hey, I've got an idea, I'm going to add it. You have to subtract before you can add. So the 3 strategies that I found super helpful, and this is for my life, but also the people I coach, is to bundle, to trade, and to eliminate. So we'll talk about them.
Bundle, trade, eliminate.
Now, we've talked about bundling in the past, because I think I talked about, connecting our friendship with the podcast. I don't know if that was a sore point.
Yeah,
but
I've been bundled.
You've been bundled.
Many a time. But this is like the 3rd season of being bundled, man.
I know, 3rd season of being bundled. But look, bundling's a simple idea, but I really like it. I think it's the simplest to grasp, and it's really practical. Bundling is basically the idea that if you want to extend activity in a particular area of life, well, then one way to do it is to combine that goal or that activity with something you currently do. So it doesn't take more time. It may take more energy, but it's not adding something. The classic is to bundle or to connect your desire to have relationships with people, or friendships, or quality time with loved ones, and to connect it with something that you're already doing. So an example for me, last season we talked a lot about friendship, and in the midlife squeeze, it's hard to keep old friends, it's hard to make new friends, and I really felt convicted by that, and I wanted to invest more in friends, and I was very, very grateful. I don't know if it's because I listened to the podcast, but one of my clients, who is also a friend now, basically said, we play pickleball with a bunch of guys every fortnight. Do you want to come along? And I came and I played a game of pickleball. I've never played it before, but I played tennis when I was young, so it's not that hard.
Okay.
And it was super fun. And I was like, I haven't had fun like this for ages. And so I don't tell them now, they'll uninvite me, but I bundle because I get to exercise and I get to hang out with friends every fortnight. Whereas I used to go to the gym anyway, so now on a Friday once a fortnight, I play pickleball instead.
Yeah, don't feel bad about that. Chances are they actually bundled you first. You just haven't realised. Yeah. You just from where you stand, you bundle other people. Sometimes you're going to get bundled.
Yeah, you just don't tell people that.
Yeah. So that sounds great. But it's hard for me not to kind of see that. So it's certainly not adding anything, but you're still doing, to some degree, you still are inserting another activity without actually costing you more time. So it's not. Is that technically subtracting, or is it more like an efficiency hack?
Yeah, it's a pseudo subtraction.
Okay,
Let's go with that. So it's definitely an efficiency hack.
Yeah, that's good. That's
the
good.
best story I have is I was coaching a group of people. Again, I take 6 people each year through a masterclass series, and we meet every fortnight. And we did this activity in terms of bundling, trading, subtracting. And one of my clients, so she was very, very busy, very smart person with a very busy job. And she lived by herself and said the thing she hates most is cooking, because she hates eating by herself, and it's hard to cook meals by herself.
Yeah.
And so she got a bit creative when she thought about these strategies, and she thought, actually, I've got another friend who is also busy and single, lives by themselves, and probably doesn't like cooking by themselves either. What if we actually hung out on a Monday night? We could, have some drinks together. We'll cook for the week together, we'll share recipes, and we'll eat a meal together on a Monday night, but then freeze stuff or take stuff away for the rest of the week. So she gave it a go. A year later, I had a conversation with her, and she's like, this is just fantastic. I still do this. It didn't take more time, because she still had to cook. In fact, it actually did subtract, because it's easier to cook with 2 people for 5 meals than it is as an individual to cook for 5 meals. She built a relationship with someone. She felt less lonely. She had more connection. And probably even save some money. So that was a win-win.
Yeah, that's great.
That's a good example of bundling. So Matt, we've got 2 more strategies to talk about: trading and eliminating. But there's a lot in bundling itself. I think you can really pause and reflect and think about how that could impact your life and how it might relate to your life. So shall we have a bit of science now?
Sounds great.
Okay.
And maybe use that silence to consider, is there an activity that you're already doing that's conducive to bundling? Hope that was useful for you to spend that 30 seconds just working out, is there something you're already doing that you can further bundle? Now, that was the first strategy out of 3, Dan. I'd love to hear more about the next one, which is divesting or trading.
Yeah, so look, trading is a slightly different idea, and it takes a bit more time to get your head around than bundling, but it's also super helpful if you want to do more by doing less. And it's the idea that you have a number of capitals. Again, you've got kind of investments in different areas, let's say either financial or relational or spiritual or intellectual. But if you're strong in one area of life or one capital of life, you can actually divest or trade those capitals to actually boost a different area of life where you're struggling, which is really smart if you have lots of one area, lots of intellect or lots of finances. So let me give you an example. I have a friend a number of years ago. I was having a chat with them, and they said, they found their dream house, and they've signed kind of a contract pending finance. But the bottom line is they couldn't get finance. Their job didn't quite allow it to happen. They didn't quite have the right numbers on paper. They knew they could actually pay for their loan for various reasons. But they went to a number of banks, and only one bank came back to them, and they were 17 grand short. And so they're like, well, we can't do it. We've only got 7 days left. And I thought about it, and I'd actually been reading this book and been thinking about the 5 capitals, and I thought, actually, these guys are super generous. They don't have, enormous amounts of money, because they've spent the last decade caring for people and being a great friend and supporting people in need and just being good people and good citizens. And I thought, you guys have heaps of relational capital, but you're struggling with 17 grand of financial capital. So I just said, look, why don't we, I didn't say, how about we trade your relational capital for financial capital, but essentially that's what I was thinking. How about we put a GoFundMe page up and let's just see what happens. So we put up a GoFundMe page and said, look, we need 17 grand. It has to be a donation. It's not like a loan. Does anyone want to help out these people? I sent it to my relational networks because I have relational capital. They sent it to their relational networks, and we raised 17 grand in 7 days. They got their house, and it was a win-win situation. People who gave were grateful because they got to support that story, and they leveraged their relational capital. Now, if they hadn't been generous, and if they didn't have wide networks, if they hadn't supported people, it wouldn't have worked. You can't just put up a GoFundMe page. But they were trading one capital for the next.
Interesting. I wonder then, presumably people have a good idea if they've done the exercise as to, again, what areas, so which out of the 5 they may have plenty of capital in, yeah?
Yep.
So in that example though, would it also kind of carry through that once you put out that call, that your relational capital had been depleted?
Well, I think probably, because then if they asked for another GoFundMe,
that's what I was thinking. Or if you asked for another GoFundMe,
I probably did deplete some of my relational capital and it doesn't always work that way. It's not always a zero-sum game. Okay. Sometimes it's just like a win-win. But I think that's a good example. Yeah. Okay. Now that's a bit of a an out-of-the-box example, but I think you can trade any capital for any other capital. So the most common example would be financial capital. I've got enough money and I don't have enough time. So what do you do? What do you do? What are some ideas?
Oh, okay. Sorry. Sorry, I thought that was...
That was not one of those rhetorical questions, Matt. That was a question.
Okay. So the obvious one would be, I'm going to actually there's heaps, right? So maybe I'll pay for a whole lot of ready-made, healthy, pre-made meals to be delivered to my door. Saves me time cooking, right? Or you're hiring the personal trainer, for example. So you can increase your physical capital, your health, by using your financial capital.
Things like, if I don't have time, I get a house cleaner or a gardener. People who can do a better job than I can or have the time to do it, and I'm going to pay them for it. Someone once said to me that you can solve a lot of problems by throwing money at it, and I think that's true. So I'm just saying that if you have an area where you have lots, where you have plenty, and you have a domain or an area where you're in deficit, is there a way to somehow divest or trade in order to increase your ability to reach into that other area?
Yeah. That's good. And again, I really, 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 really like that. Because I do. And that to me seems to be less of a kind of efficiency hack compared to the bundling.
Because you're actually removing something in order to get something.
You're exchanging something. Right? You're exchanging something in order to bolster something else, right? So, but I guess again, worst case scenario, some people would probably feel that that to some degree that's, and correct me if this is wrong, but this is almost like it's still the Titanic, and I've just shuffled some deck chairs around.
I think that could be true. But if you're someone who, I think the financial capital is the classic. If you've worked your guts out, you've overinvested in career, and your sole driver has been making money, and now you're suffering in terms of health or relationships, well then I think it makes a lot of sense. It's not just a small hack. Start spending your money to build friendships in the best way, and start spending your money to increase your health in the best way. Give yourself the best chance to boost those areas because you've overinvested. I think that can be helpful if you're in that situation.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe to go to that example, that would be coupled with actually spending less time making money.
Absolutely.
Going ahead. So it's not just taking what I've already got and diverting it this way.
Yeah.
It's actually, I'm going to spend less time making money, full stop.
Yeah. Well, and that might lead to our third habit, or third practice, which is plain and simple elimination.
Yeah, good.
And in that situation, so elimination is literally, I've just got to say no and cut stuff to make space. So I think the example you gave with career is more an elimination.
Yeah.
I work 80 hours a week. That's mad, and it's impacting all these other areas of my life. I'm going to actually work 40 hours a week, which means I'm going to quit my job and get a lower paid job. I'm going to make some significant sacrifices in terms of my career capital and progression in the company because I need the time back. That's elimination.
That to me, it's almost counterintuitive, because I think that to me, and I would assume a bunch of other people, that sounds like the scariest. But I think a lot of the time it's going to be the most effective, and it may be, for a lot of us, myself included, really the most necessary.
Oh, absolutely. And look, if you're totally stretched for time and you're running from here to there, you don't have a choice. Elimination has to happen. But the beautiful thing is, and this is where we go back to subtraction neglect as a science, eliminating and subtracting from your life doesn't necessarily mean you'll stop moving forward.
Yeah.
You just might move forward in a way that is surprising and different.
Yes, yeah.
I've actually worked with quite a lot of executives or people who have gone up the corporate ladder and they just keep climbing and they're miserable. Or business owners who have created a successful business in the sense of they're making money and they're actually, like, they achieved all the goals they set out to achieve and they hate the business that they run because it's just, it's like a chain around their neck. It controls their life, you know. And so in those situations, elimination means I'm going to make some tough identity changes, some tough practical changes, but the outcome is almost always positive because people are like, wow, I have freedom now, you know, and actually what I thought I wanted didn't give me the satisfaction I want. I actually love hanging out with my kids, or I love playing pickleball, or I love, you know, working in a non-profit and having fewer hours, but actually making a difference aligned with my values. So, you know, those elimination calls can really add to your life. They just are hard to do.
Like, what are some kind of easy wins? Or let's go the least hard wins.
Well, yeah, because we've gone pretty extreme with like a career change, haven't we?
Yeah. I heard this great example the other day from a mate, and I thought, wow, this is like really pertinent because I think, he's at a particular stage in life when this happened. So I think this is probably a kind of easy win when it comes to elimination when you've been around the block a couple of times. And that is, he was talking about motorcycling, right? So he'd been into motorcycling for a little while, like he had the bikes. One morning, he found himself waking up pretty early, jumped on the bike to go to work, booted, was like going along, like looked down, saw he was doing well over the speed limit and freaked right out. And at that moment, it popped into his head the thought, do I actually like motorcycling, or do I like the idea of being someone who likes motorcycling and motorcycles? And he thought, you know what, I don't even really love this so much as I just loved, I was actually in love with the idea of being someone who really dug it. So that day, put it away, put it on Gumtree or Marketplace, whatever, sold it, and has picked up cycling instead and has bundled that, without using this terminology, obviously, with doing that with a bunch of other people. And so it's social, and it's also good for his physical capital in terms of his health, you know. So that was really interesting. I reckon I could think of 2 or 3 areas if I really applied myself. And then again, it's not an easy activity, but I reckon some low-hanging fruit for people who've been around the block. There's a bunch of stuff you probably are invested in, spending time and money on. But if you were really brutally honest with yourself about it, you'd probably discern, actually, I'm not doing this for the love of it, but because I feel, I wanted to be one of those people who like the thing or who does the thing. But it's not really anything that brings me joy or meaning.
Or maybe even, I used to like it. But life has changed, the whole midlife squeeze thing. And now I don't like it as much.
And that's okay.
So look, to answer your question now that I've had time to think about it, I came up with this. This is profound, everyone. This could be a life-changing moment.
Lucky I'm already sitting down.
I know. But I was thinking about this expression, and it's stealing Newton's third law, completely. But for every new action, you need an equal and opposite subtraction. That's my Daniel's third law of space making. Okay, for every new action, you need an equal and opposite subtraction. So I think if you take it at a very simple level, every time I buy a new pair of shoes or a new kind of shirt, as a new action, I need an equal and opposite subtraction. I need to give one pair of shoes away. I need to give one shirt away. Otherwise, my closet will be full. Okay, I think that's a great rule of thumb. At work, every time I accept a new project, well, then I need to think about what project am I going to close or delegate or maybe significantly delay, because you can't say yes to something without there being a no or a cost to you. Every time I say yes to a new recurring meeting, I have to say, well, that's going to be something that is now added to my schedule. How do I remove an equal and opposite recurring meeting from my schedule? I did test this with my wife, and she said, does it work for kids? I'm like, no, it doesn't. So it doesn't work in every area of life. But I think it's a good rule of thumb that in terms of it might not be so much that you're trying to subtract intentionally, but at least if you add to your life, don't just add. Think, what can I subtract in an equal and opposite way, because otherwise I am accumulating.
We've referenced Cal Newport a lot, and one of his ideas, maybe just kind of made this popular, but he talks a lot about the idea of schedules, and I think you could say in those 5 domains of life, really kind of at the very, very most, but particularly with time, you want to have it 80% maxed at the most, because once things go past 80% in terms of systems and busyness, a whole lot of disproportional chaos seems to kind of ensue, So I kind of like the idea of taking your law and coupling it with if I was in a position where I thought I was running at just below 80%, when it came to my time, I'd then like to apply your law, because that would mean that if I applied that diligently, I'd never go beyond that 80.
Okay,
you know what
so
I mean?
you leave a bit of margin.
Yeah, you leave
so
some
you're not
fat.
saying 100%
No.
or 110%
No.
is my margin.
No.
You're saying I want 80 or 90%.
Yeah, that's right. 80.
And
I want 80.
here we go. The A type in me.
Yeah.
All right, 80%,
Yeah.
and then you apply that law.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's elimination.
I like it.
And the reason it is important when you're stuck is you can't just keep adding. You need to find ways to simplify to give you the space to get unstuck. Okay, Matt, we're at the end of this episode, but it's the super important bit, which is the application.
Thanks, mate. I won't leave.
I'm hoping more for those listeners who are
Gotcha.
driving.
Okay.
What do we want our listeners to do between now and next week?
Yeah,
because
okay.
it's the doing that actually changes
Yeah,
your life.
yeah. This is kind of building on what we asked them to do last week. So again, hopefully everyone out there has done the exercise, the 5 capitals exercise.
Or at least identified an error in their life.
Yeah, that's
at the
right.
very
Just
least.
one, yeah. So 1 capital / one domain. So start with that. We'd like you to take that area and just make one small change to that area. And to undertake that one small change, we'd like you to do one and only one of the above 3 options. Yeah. So we'd like you to bundle something like we talked about. So again, take that area, that capital, that domain, bundle something up. Or, not and, or divest and trade. So again, like you've already beautifully explained, taking from one where you've probably got plenty of in a particular capital and using that to build up another capital over here, that capital you've identified. Or, again, not in addition to, but or just eliminate something from that domain / capital that you've identified.
Yeah,
Cut
great.
something out.
Great.
Yeah.
And the heartbeat of this is that you end up next week saying, I picked something really small
Yeah, that's it.
and really tangible that could become habitual,
Yeah.
but that makes a bit more space in my life
Yeah.
through subtraction or elimination
Yeah.
rather than just
Yeah.
doing more. It could be something fairly big, like I'm going to have a regular coffee once a month with someone
Yeah.
to kind of bundle. It could be something small but emotionally difficult, like I'm actually going to go through my cupboard and get rid of one
Yeah.
shirt and one pair of shoes, you know. But the point is to do something less, not more, to set you up for the rest of the pod course.
So let's keep it realistic.
Let's keep it realistic.
Yeah.
So by the end of this pod course, we would love people to have made one small practical shift in one area of their life or one domain that helps them get a bit less stuck. And so we're moving forward. Don't forget to download the handout, which has all of our activities and the important stuff that guides your actions at spacemakers.au/S3. But next week, Matt, we're going to talk about how to harness, that's the H, how to harness your strengths.
Yes.
We're going to talk about the importance of strengths and how to get unstuck by focusing on what works rather than what doesn't. But until next time, make space.
See ya.